Alright, so in this video we're going to continue talking about slope. The last one got a little long on us, but we talked about the slope formula. We talked about finding slope just by counting rise over run. So I want us to continue to use the slope formula here because there's going to be some things that are going to come into play that are a little bit different that you need to be aware of. So you'll notice that these two problems have basically the same questions as the last three, but the directions are a little bit different. So here it says find the slope of each line, and it says the line through the points. On the previous problems it said find the slope, and it just gave you the 2 points. They're the exact same problem, same type of problem. Okay, so as we are looking at finding the slope, again we're going to use our slope formula, which is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And so as we substitute our numbers into the formula, in this case we have 4 minus a negative 2 divided by 5 minus 6. And so again, that minus a negative makes that 2 become positive. And so as we simplify, 4 plus 2 is 6. 5 minus 6 is negative 1, which gives us negative 6 when we simplify. Now, I told you in the previous video that I really would like for you to begin to get a mental picture of what this line looks like from a steepness standpoint when I say it has a slope of negative 6. So what you should begin to think here is that if we have a point on this line, for every 6 units that we go down, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we can go right 1 unit, and we're going to have a line that looks something like this. Now, is that going to be perfect? Absolutely not. But it is a sketch, so we can see about how steep this line is. Okay, so I think that's important for you to realize. Now, on the next one, again, I'd encourage you to pause the video and do this one on your own, and then come back and see what I do. So if you want to pause it, give you 3 seconds. Alright, so if you have worked this one, again, we're going to substitute our numbers into our formula. So we're going to have negative 7 minus 5 divided by negative 4 minus negative 3. And again, be really careful here with your sign. So that minus and negative makes the 3 positive. So negative 7 minus 5 is negative 12. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Again, when you simplify that, we see our slope is positive 12. Now, again, from a steepness standpoint, what does that look like? Well, again, what it means is that if we have a point on this line, for every 12 units we go up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, we're going to go right 1 unit, and we're going to have this line that's really, really steep. Kind of looks something like that. And so again, you can see what that steepness is going to look like. Again, these are just sketches. They are not perfect, but it does hopefully give you an idea about what it should look like. Now, look at these. These are basically the same type of question, but they are a little bit different. So as we look at the first one, again, just going to use our slope formula. It says to find the slope of the line through these points. And so using our slope formula, we're going to say 5 minus 5 over negative 1 minus 2. And 5 minus 5 is 0. And negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3. When we simplify that, we get that we have a slope of 0. Now, what does that look like from a mental standpoint? Well, I'll use the fraction here as our illustration. It means that if we have a point on our line, we are not going to have a vertical change up or down, but we have a negative run. So this would move us to the left 3 units, so we can do that. And so you would have a line then that looks like this. Now, understand something. If the line has a 0 slope, it is horizontal. Always. I'll give you some ways to remember that in a few minutes, but that is always going to be the case. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a second. Look at the next example. So if we again use our slope formula, we have -4 minus 1 over 3 minus 3. And -4 minus 1 is -5. 3 minus 3 is 0. Well, what is -5 divided by 0? No, it's not 0. If you said that, that is something very common that people say. They say, oh, it's 0. No, 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 no. You never, ever, 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 ever divide by 0. So you can't do it. So what we say is that this is undefined, or what we refer to as no slope. Okay, those two terms are going to be interchangeable, undefined or no slope. Now, from a mental standpoint, what does it look like? Well, it means that if we have a point that's on this line, for every 5 units that we go down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we don't run any. We don't go right or left. And so our line then is a vertical line, which we say has no slope. Now, you've been lied to all your life. People have always said that 0 and nothing are the same thing. That is not true. 0 is a number. If your line is horizontal, like the first one, it has a 0 slope. If your line is undefined, like the second one, it has no slope. They are not the same thing. They are not even close to being the same thing. Okay, so you need to understand, if it is a vertical line, and this may be somewhere where in your notes you make a little side note, if the line is vertical, it has no slope, or what we call an undefined slope. Okay? So again, we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. So look at the next problem. It says we want to find the slope of the line with the equation y equals -1. So if you remember in a couple videos back, when we were in section 3.2, we talked about this equation that only has one variable. And I told you back then, in that previous video, that you could make a table, or you could memorize what this is going to look like, or I'd rather you just know what it means. And what we said is that when you see this equation, y equals -1, it means that the y-intercept is -1. This line is going to go through the y-axis at -1. And because there is no x-intercept, there is no because there's no x variable, there is no x-intercept. So this line never does cross the x-axis in any way, at any place. Okay? So, because of that, if it's never going to cross the x-axis, it must be parallel to it. And so it must be horizontal. And so our question here is, well, what kind of slope is that? Well, again, as we just mentioned in the first example here, that is a 0 slope. Now, you could think about this from a counting rise over run standpoint. If I were to try to figure out the rise and run, well, my rise to go from this first point on the left, this point, to go from there to this second point, I don't run, I don't rise any. So it'd be 0 over some amount, we'll call it 3. And again, 0 divided by 3 is 0. And so we can hopefully be able to convince ourselves that if it is horizontal, it has what we call a 0 slope. Now, on the next one, the equation is x equals x minus 4 equals 0. And I told you that if the equation only has one variable, solve for that variable. So in this case, we're going to add 4 to each side of this equation. And we're going to get the equation x equals 4. And again, you could take that equation and you could make a table, or you could memorize what it looks like. But again, I'd rather you just know what it means. And so when you see that equation, what it says is that our x-intercept is 4. So it's going to go through this point. And because there's no y value, this line doesn't go through the y-axis. And so if it never goes towards the y-axis in any way, then it must be parallel to it, which means it's got to be vertical. And so again, our question is, what is the slope of that line? Well, again, it has to be no slope. Or again, you can use undefined. Your math lab is going to use the word undefined. I'm going to use both of them interchangeably. Now, again, if you were to count rise over run with this little sketch, well, let's say you're going to use this point. Well, you could count up some amount, we'll call it maybe 2, but then to go from this point at the bottom to the point at the top, you go up 2, but then you don't run any. And so your run part of this is 0, which has to be, again, no slope or undefined. If you have questions about that, please let me know. So here's sort of a summary of the types of slopes that we have. We have what we call the positive slope. As we look at it from left to right, it goes up. That's pretty simple. The negative slope, as you look at it from left to right, it goes down. Again, you've seen examples of all of those already. But where people get confused is on these two. 0 slope versus no slope. And so I'm going to give you an example or give you a way to think about, actually I'll give you a couple of ways to think about no slope versus 0 slope. So let me pose this. If you've ever been snow skiing, or you've watched people snow ski on TV or maybe in person or whatever, you can kind of picture what snow skiing looks like. Okay, so for those of you that have snow skied, my question would be, what happens if you snow ski on this? And I can hear some of you going, you're going to die, right? And that's exactly right. Why are you going to die? Well, because if you were trying to ski off of this, so let's say that you're up here. Here's my little stick man. If you were going to ski off of that, you just jumped off a cliff, you're going to fall to your death. You're going to go, you're going to hit the ground, you're going to die because you jumped off a cliff. However, and the reason that that is the case is because there is no slope. There is no slope to ski on. If you've ever been snow skiing, you know that there has to be something for your feet to be on to be able to go skiing down the hill or down the mountain. And so there is no slope. You jumped off a cliff. Okay? However, how fast would you go if you were trying to ski on this? And the answer to that is, well, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to go 0 miles an hour. So again, there's my little stick person. Well, my little stick person can stand on that slope. They're not going to die. They're just not going to go anywhere. They're going to go 0 miles an hour. And so if you've ever snow skied, maybe that kind of helps you think about those two different scenarios. Most people that I teach typically have not gone snow skiing. Some people usually have, but a lot haven't. And so you don't maybe relate to that real well. So let me give you another way. So if we think about this line is vertical. We would say that it has no slope. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make that say no slope. And so that's kind of corny, but maybe that's something that really helps you. And then if you look at this line, the question is, what kind of slope does it have? Well, it has 0 slope. And so we're going to make it say 0 slope. And so hopefully that will help you in understanding the difference in 0 slope and